for the audio issues that folks were running into at the beginning of the session. I don't think there was really anything we could do on our end to increase the volume. So hopefully everybody was able to figure out a solution with that. So anyway, Regina, I don't know if you've been monitoring the questions, but as you were speaking, we had an amazing question come in, and I think it kind of follows up with some of the things you touched on towards the end of this, towards the end of your speech, but I think it also transcends it. So the question is, and thank you, Dallas, for sharing it. I know that efforts such as signing petitions and donating to important causes for Black and Brown folks and sharing relevant information to bring light to the systemic inequality that hasn't left us in 2020 are all okay starting points. But do you have any other recommendations for how to do the work and to avoid sitting on the sidelines for folks who attending protests and taking to the streets isn't a viable option for them at this time?
Yes, good morning. Good morning. First, good morning to everyone. No, thank you so much for that question. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the protest and marching out in the streets, that's just one part of it. You always have the option to begin in your sphere of influence. What are the policies? What are the practices that go on in your work every single day? You can literally begin to look at your HR, your hiring practices in your organization. What are the things that you always default to doing that you need to change, that you need to make sure that you're being as inclusive as possible? And think about even extending that sphere of influence. Look at the kinds of laws and ordinances at your local city council meetings, and then at your state legislative meetings. What are those kinds of practices that you need to pause and say, wait a minute, are these ordinances, are these laws, are they harming a certain group? Are they benefiting a certain group? How can we make sure that we're including everyone, that everyone gets to benefit from whatever that policy is? And so there's so much policy work that needs to be done. And then I also don't want to leave that question without adding in that some of the work that we have to do is internal. That yes, we do need the action. We need those policy changes so that we can have sustainable changes. But we also need to make sure that we're doing the internal work, that we're seeing people through different eyes, that we're making sure that we are challenging and doing the kind of self-exploration to unearth the stereotypes and biases that creep in because of how we are socialized. And let me be clear, we all have them. I raise my hand. And so we have to make sure that we are interrogating ourselves so that we can put forward the best policies that will be inclusive for everyone.
Thank you. So I think we're in a little bit of a lull. That was, I'm trying to monitor the chat to see, there's lots of shout outs and props coming to you, to Regina, people acknowledging your passion. And I think there's a significant amount of excitement that we are opening with you, we're setting a good tone for the next 2 days. I know another question that has come up amongst the, I think the conference organizers and some other circles that I've been part of recently. And you touched on this again a little bit in your speech, but we're wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail about what makes what's happening in 2020 different from what's happened in other times in history. Obviously, as you said, this is not the first time that we've seen this call for justice, that we've seen this call for transformation. But I think there's a lot of us that feel like, I don't know, existentially or viscerally, something that there's something different about this time, but I don't know if we've been able to really identify what. So anyway, just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. And you know what, I think that we all feel that it's a little bit different. Let me go back a little bit in history, just to share this with you. I have the opportunity of working with one of the lieutenants of the civil rights movement, Dr. Bernard Lafayette. And so those of us, his mentees would sit and ask him, how did you all come together in this movement? And how did you actually make sustainable changes? And he would share with us all of these things. And then recently, as we have reached out to him and said, Doc, is this different? And he said, yes, it's different. And we said, so, and why? Why do you think that? And he said, because the kind of coalition that has come together across every single demographic. He said, yes, back in the civil rights movement that we had, white folks that were working with us. He said, but this multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic, every demographic out there marching together, and for those that were not marching, trying to make changes within their own spheres of influence, calling on their senators, on their representatives. He said there's something different in the air. And the other thing that he talks about a lot is the youth, the young people of our day who were brought up in a moment in time that says we won't wait. He talked about how they were perhaps a little bit more patient, even though they did have that fierce urgency. He's saying that the young people of today, they will not wait. And he said that they're bringing us along in their wake. And so he enumerated those kinds of differences. And I completely agree that there was something very different, that we were all sort of hopefully, shelter in place, those of us that were blessed enough to have shelter. And we were riveted, and we watched the horrific things that were going on, the injustices that were taking place, because we literally had nothing else to do, nothing else to distract us but to look at humanity being squeezed out of people. And I think that did something to people at a visceral level, and folks they could not turn away. And so, and I think that this time is different, because I think this reached people at a level literally in the marrow of the bones. And I think that's why we will not be stopped, because everybody's a part of this. It's not just a few folks over here, a few folks over there. Everyone is saying, we will all fight for justice for everyone together.
All right, so we've had another question come in, and so just for folks who, because I see things kind of popping up in chat, and then there's been a handful of things that have come up in the Q&A. So I think the way it works is if you drop something into the Q&A, the moderators can see it, but I don't think obviously the attendees can see it. So just to clarify. So the next question that's come up is, how do we incorporate more folks with lived experiences or lived experience into leadership roles in the homeless response system, either at the local, state, federal? I mean, I think it's all inclusive, but how do we incorporate more folks with lived experience into leadership roles?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad for this question. I've just been working with several teams over the last month and working on how to make sure that this happens at the federal level and at the state level, and then with just local COCs, continuum of care. And so the first thing is around our approach. It is making sure that we're not bringing people in for just, feedback or just, for input on something after we have actually done it. It is about co-creating with those with lived experience. Now, people say, well, gosh, that's a challenge. How do we go about doing that? So let's walk through it. When we're asking folks to come in and be a part of our groups, we have to make sure that those groups are inclusive and that they have all of the resources that they need. So during COVID, are we making sure that folks with lived experience have a tablet or a laptop to be a part of all of the conversations that are going on? Are we making sure that we de-jargonize our conversations so that they won't feel otherwise, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on, when we really could just use, a 2-syllable word instead of, some acronym in our alphabet soup? And then I think the other thing that we need to make sure that we're doing is providing those with lived experience, if they don't have been a part of professional development, and making sure that they understand everything that's going on, then provide that. Because think about it, it's very easy for us to say, well, oh my gosh, well, they don't really understand. Well, none of us came into our jobs fully understanding what was going on either. We had to learn all of these different levels of bureaucracy and all of these funding streams and all of those different things. And someone took the time to walk us through those. And we were often afforded professional development to learn how to facilitate, to learn how to do all of those other things. And so we should be offering the same things to those with lived experience if they've not had an opportunity to do those things. And so I think those would be three things that I would throw out immediately.
Excellent, thank you. And so we've had, so we've actually got a couple of questions that have come in. So I'm going to start with Abby. I see the question that you posted in the chat. So, and I know Christina asked to put it in the Q&A, but I see it, so I'll go ahead and address it. So there's a question about, well, I'll just read the comment. So it'd be interesting to watch the work of the Urban Institute Mobility from poverty cohort to benchmark ways to address systemic issues. Annie Casey Foundation has some great resources regarding how organizations can address diversity and inclusion. We're wondering if you might have any other recommendations of organizations or resources that folks should be looking at in the here and now.
Yes, no, thank you, absolutely. So I do have to give a shout out because I am an Annie Casey fellow, and so they do have some wonderful resources. But I would also refer you to, there's actually a whole website, and it's called racialequity.org, and there are tremendous, tremendous resources on that site. Another place to go to for readings or for trainings is Race Forward. They have just a whole continuum of offerings of trainings that they do as well. So I would start there. If you want to look at things like implicit bias, I will look at the Kerwin Institute, which is in the Ohio State University. So those are places to get started. And I can certainly offer, Jason, if you'd like me to put together a list of resources that you can send out to all of your conference participants, I'm happy to do that.
That would be awesome. And yeah, I think it would be greatly appreciated. I started by putting the racialequity.org in the chat, and I was like, probably easier if we share some things. Plus also we'll have, we're recording this Q&A, so we'll also make that available to folks afterwards. So let's see, we've had another question come in. So this is from Jessica. When you talk about not acting through a charity or patriarchal model, that resonates as an issue with the homeless services we need to address. I anticipate difficult conversations with groups running services in this way. Do you have any recommendations for where to start the conversation?
Yeah. And you're right, it is just a very nuanced conversation, a complicated conversation, because it's so ingrained within our nonprofits and our homelessness services system. It is always about helping other folks rather than supporting and being there for them. So I think the conversation sometimes has to start with helping us look at each other and say, what do you enjoy in your life about being able to make your own decisions, about not having other folks to tell you, when you have to go to bed, when you have to get up, where you're going to live. What do you enjoy about those things? And so having a conversation to get people ready, because what we want to do is to help people to understand that the same kinds of things that they enjoy about having agency over their own lives, about making their decisions, about what services or supports that they want to accept, that's the same thing that everyone else wants. That we shouldn't be otherizing people because that they happen to be experiencing houselessness at this particular time. And so help people to begin to think about that it's any human to another. If you want to make decisions about your life, if you feel that you have the wherewithal to make decisions about your life, then the question to ask is, why don't you believe that about others? What is it that you're believing? What is your stereotype about other folks that you don't believe that they should also have that same right to make those decisions and decide what their plan of leaving homelessness should be, and that we're there to support them and make sure that we're helping them to knock down barriers that may be in their way, or helping them get access to resources, or health care, or all of the other things that they need. So I would start there with that kind of conversation, helping people to think about, but what do you want for your life, and why don't you want it for everyone else's life?
So our next question is very practical, and I think we may have to put you in the time machine to go back a few years to some of your previous roles, maybe your CSH work. So it's a question focused on, or the question is, how it would be great to have funding to be able to pay folks with lived experience to be active participants. Our community does that with youth through the HUD YP DP program, but does anybody pay folks with lived experience from the general population to serve as a member on their continuum? If they are doing that, do you have any recommendations for possible funding sources? Thanks.
Yeah. So two lines of thought I want to put here. So one, if they're working full-time with you and a part of your team, like they're an employee, so pay them through that way. If it's part of that they're doing maybe part-time work, you can always pay them through your continuous planning funds. So from your NOFA planning. And if you're working toward doing that thing, say perhaps you've allocated, all of your planning funds, for this year, and you want to make sure though that you're building a team that has lived experience on there, you can always reach out to your local community foundations as well as your United Ways and ask them if there'll be a bridge in terms of paying those funds up front while you work them into your regular funding budget, whether it's through your COC NOFA, or if your collaborative applicant happens to be a part of your local government. This is a position. And so making sure that the real goal is to pay them as though they are employees. Now, let me be clear, there is a spectrum of work that folks with lived experience can offer. And so for those who don't want to be a full-time employee, or this is not the career that they have chosen, but they can certainly offer, great advice and help to co-design different things with you, but perhaps not on a full-time basis, that's where I would make sure that I'm going to the foundations and asking for funding to do this work, because you do not want to not pay people. The same way that you're getting paid to do that for all of the thought work that you put into it, or your outreach or your case management, it is the same thing for them. And so please, if you have allocated all of your funding for the year through your COC, please reach out to your local foundations, community foundations, and your United Ways.
So we actually have another very practical question that's come in from Amanda. And I think you kind of touched on this earlier with I think we've kind of skirted how folks with lived experience could get involved. But let me read the question. So most policies and procedures that are implemented do not have direct input from our homeless community, which is not beneficial. Current policies and procedures for housing assistance programs put up a lot of barriers for our participants. What would you recommend to get the voices of our participants heard and implemented into policies and procedures that directly affect them?
Yeah. So I would like to pose back to you all, how many of you all talk to your the folks that you are serving, whether they're in your rapid housing programs, your permanent supportive housing programs, or in your shelters on a regular basis? Like literally to have listening sessions with them and not try to guide the conversation, but simply ask questions. What has your experience been? What do you think about this? To literally, just like they were a consultant, to put up a question and say, we've got this practice in place, where we ask people to leave, at 6 a.m., or we ask people to be in line at 4 p.m., or we ask people if they're in permanent supportive housing not to have anyone else to come over. What do you all think about that? What could we do differently? Literally, it is having a conversation. It is asking questions. It is making sure that you are listening, and then you go back and make those policy changes. And so it's not that difficult to really make sure that on a regular basis, not like every 6 months that you may have to do something for your funder to say that, gosh, we had a listening session, but on the regular, actually having those conversations. And one of the things that I suggest is that at least quarterly, you have an outside person to come in and do that. And you don't have to hire, someone. Literally, it's at a local, university, maybe perhaps someone in the social work department. to come in on a quarterly basis and to talk to those with lived experience in terms of getting their perspective on how the services are going, but doing it in the ways that you're understanding which one of those policies and practices are actually impacting their experience.
Perfect. So we're kind of running out of time, believe it or not. We've got a few more minutes here, and then we were hoping to let you go around 10:25. So let me just check. I kind of checking in on the chat, and I think we've actually covered the Q&A. So kind of recognizing where we're at time-wise, I think let's, I guess let's kind of wrap it up with, is there anything either that you didn't include in the words that you shared with us at the beginning, or anything we haven't covered in the Q&A? I guess, do you have any closing thoughts? You know, anything we haven't touched on yet where you're like, hey, by the way, keep this in your mind as you're going forward?
I think keep this in your mind is to hold on to the belief that we can transform our homelessness response system and our housing systems. Will it be hard? Oh, you bet. Absolutely. But if we stay committed to each other, and when I say other, I'm talking about and those that we serve, if we stay committed to each other, we can transform this system bit by bit by bit. And so I would just ask everyone to stay committed, because we can make a difference.
Okay. Regina, every time I have the opportunity to chat with you or to hear you speak, it's absolutely amazing. And so on behalf of everybody here in Michigan, thank you for taking the time to chat with us today, to share your thoughts about this moment in history and all the potentials it affords us with transforming ourselves, transforming our service delivery systems, our agencies, our society, everything moving forward. So a huge thank you for taking the time to join us. Yeah, I'm getting comments from folks in the chat that they wish they could clap, or we could give you a standing ovation. So yeah, you'll just kind of have to take that. So because the accolades are pouring in via the chat, that folks were very encouraged that to hear your words today. So so I think we're at the point where we'll go ahead and wrap up the keynote here for this morning. For everybody who is here for the conference, so sorry, Regina, not you, although you're welcome to attend other sessions as well. But I'll recommend everybody swing back to the website. And here I will, just as a reminder, see if I can share my screen. And here you go. So push everybody back to the website, michigan.gov, Homeless Summit. And then you can select on your sessions for the 10:45 breakout. And I've been getting messages that folks have been logging in and getting the room set up. So you have a little bit of time. The sessions will start around 10:45, but do encourage you to go there to check things out. So thank you everybody for logging in for the first session. I saw that we were getting close to 300 folks, and which is awesome. And we hope to see you throughout the rest of the sessions for today and tomorrow. Thanks everybody.